Hi, everybody. My name is Will Howell, and I'm a youth director at Countryside Community Church in Omaha, Nebraska. And my context is our church's move to the Tri-Faith Initiative, which was started back in 2011. The Tri-Faith Initiative is a cooperation, a partnership between our church, Countryside Community Church, Temple Israel in Omaha, and also American Muslim Institute, where we're building a campus that will host all three communities and then have a kind of a center that's called the Abrahamic Tent, where they'll host speakers and things like that. It's a really exciting adventure that we're on, and we've begun building the relationships with the other communities, and we're supposed to move to the Tri-Faith. We sold our church, and we're going to move to the Tri-Faith at the end of 2018. So we're really excited for that. So one of my theologians is Anton Wessels, who talks about pluralism today, especially in the Abrahamic faiths. And sometimes we refer to ourselves not only as the Tri-Faith, but the faith communities of the Abrahamic faith tradition. So Anton Wessels wrote a book called The Torah, the Gospel, and the Quran. 3 books, 2 cities, 1 tale. He thinks that it's important for Jews, Christians, and Muslims to read the Torah, the Gospel, and the Quran together and attempt to understand them as much as possible in association with one another. And we've been doing that. In fact, today is Sunday, and we had the Imam from American Muslim Institute actually preach at our Sunday morning services, which was really just kind of amazing to see something like that happen. So the common message of the 3 books, the Torah, the Gospel, and the Quran, are directed to all who would hear it and all who would know that they've been called. To those who are called by God through the service of the prophets, and historically this concerns the 3 separate communities. The Jewish community was called the Kahal in Hebrew, which literally means called. The Christian community is called the Ecclesia, which is the Greek translation in the Septuagint and the New Testament of the Hebrew word Kahal as well. The Muslim community is called Ummah. The Quran refers to this community as sharing in a communal service to God. Abraham, or Ibrahim as referred to in the Quran, was a community or an Ummah in himself according to the Quran, as he's the father of all 3 religions. So the word community, Ummah, can refer in the Quran to all 3 communities, the Jewish, the Christian, and the Muslim, because all 3 are people of the book, respectively the Torah revealed to Moses, the Gospel revealed by Jesus, and the Quran revealed by Muhammad. And an Arabic Quran is revealed to Muhammad that confirms the previous revelations, so that he could warn the mother city, Mecca, and its surrounding areas. Abraham and Ishmael, who together laid the foundation for the dedicated house of prayer, the Kaaba, prayed together, "Make us both submissive and our descendants into a community that submits to you in full trust." The Ummah Muslima. This Ummah should not be understood in the narrow sense as a Muslim community, but as a community to which all 3, Jew, Christian, and Muslim, can potentially belong, a community that therefore involves all 3 and ultimately all people. Wessels talks a lot about the 3 books and the 2 cities, and that there is a sense of exodus for each community from the city of idolatry or the city of injustice to a new city that's regarded as a justice-seeking city or a peaceful city. So Abraham came from Ur, and at that time it was a city of some size with a highly developed civilization. Abraham confronts his father and the city with issues of idolatry, and in Abraham's call to leave Ur, he breaks with the unjust king Nimrod, the ruler of Assur and Babel. He leaves his country and people to practice religion as it should be, to the promised land, as we know, a land flowing with milk and honey, which is more associated with justice and peace. According to the Quran, Abraham completes his emigration by building the Kaaba, which is still in Mecca. Jewish thinker Martin Buber uses the term hijrah for Abraham's exodus. Hijrah is the word that's used in the Quran when Muhammad moves his whole Muslim group from Mecca to Medina. And Buber calls Abraham's whole life a hijrah, and he calls it a religious event in that way. The New Testament contains the same Exodus grammar. Joseph and Mary must flee to Egypt with the child Jesus to escape King Herod the Great. And after founding asylum in Egypt, Jesus is then led out of Egypt to fulfill the word of the prophet. On the Mount of Transfiguration in Luke 9:30 through 31, Moses and Elijah are speaking to Jesus about the end of his life, his leaving and departure, or as it's written literally in Greek, his exodus from Jerusalem. Jesus had to undergo this exodus because Jerusalem had become a city of injustice. And then in Mecca, where Muhammad grew up, also saw himself standing in the tradition of the earlier prophets, is kind of like any prophet that was oppressed and called a liar and mocked in his hometown. And he saw the unfair business practices that were happening all around Mecca. And so the exodus that Muhammad performed in 622 was moving from Mecca to Medina, which was then called the City of Light. And they welcomed him as their leader and as their judge. And this was actually the defining moment for Islam. It's where they would date the start of Islam, when Muhammad made that hijrah to Medina. So the term hijrah means to emigrate or to journey, and also becomes an example for believers for leaving their oppressive, unbelieving rulers and finding a new city that God has led them to. The major prophetic figures in the Bible and the Quran since Abraham, talking about Moses, Jesus, up until and including Muhammad, are all commanded to break with unjust leaders and the injustice of their respective cities. Abraham had to break with Nimrod, king of the oppressive empires of Assur and Babel in Mesopotamia. Moses stood up to Pharaoh of Egypt and had to break with his injustice and leave with the children of Israel. Jesus opposed the spiritual and political leaders of Jerusalem, which had become unjust, and had to perform an exodus from that city. Muhammad preached against the wicked and egotistic leaders of Mecca and eventually had to leave. So Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad all had to go to the land God would show them, the promised land, the promised city, the New Jerusalem, Medina, the city of light, and the city of the future. Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad call people to the exodus, to emigration, to hijrah, to break with the city of injustice and go to the promised new city, because there justice and righteousness will be done. Why should Jews, Christians, and Muslims not be able to celebrate the exodus, the hijrah, together and travel toward a world where there are justice and peace and bread enough for all? That's my question. I'll repeat it. Why should Jews, Christians, and Muslims not be able to celebrate the Exodus and travel together toward a world where there are justice and peace and bread enough for all? Our church is actually doing a sort of hijra where we sold the church and we're literally moving to this tri-faith initiative where we hope to be in community, and that's why I chose this week, because we're talking about 3 communities becoming one community with 3 distinct areas. A lot of people ask us if we're going to blend the services and all become one, and that is definitely not the case. We will practice our religions in the way that we have always practiced them, and there will be many opportunities to learn from each other and to build relationships and build that community. So we're really excited about that, and I found Anton Wessels to be very engaging and interesting. So thank you.